Chapter 8 is going to go through all of the different bones and regions of the skeletal system. So the first division we can make in the skeletal system is between axial and appendicular. So the axial skeleton is in white in this picture. So axial is going to be kind of along this central axis. So that's where it gets this name. This is the central axis of the body. Most of these bones are either in the skull, along the vertebrae, the sacrum, tailbone, coccyx, the sternum, which is along the center. And then the only ones that aren't strictly along the center line are the ribs. And then appendicular are your appendages, is where that name comes from. So your appendages are your arms and your legs. So these appendicular skeletons start with the shoulder girdle. So that's going to be your scapula and your clavicle, arm, humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalange. On the lower limb, it also starts at the girdle. So that's the hip girdle. So you've got your coxal bone here, femur, leg, tibia, fibula, tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. One thing that helps me remember if something is an axial, if it's on your arms and legs and you have a left and a right, then it's going to go in the appendicular column, right? We have a left patella and a right patella, so that's going to go in the appendicular column. If it goes along the central axis of the body, then it's going to go in the axial column. There are some bones called sesamoid bones. So sesamoid bones form within tendons, and we have two. The patellas are sesamoid bones. They form inside of the tibial tendon that runs between the femur and then down to the tibia. Sometimes when tendons are overused, you can find ossification or other sesamoid bones that occur in some people, but the only one we're going to learn is the patella. And then sutural bones are typically teeny tiny bones that occur in the actual sutures of the skull. And these are extremely variable and they're very small. So you may have sutural bones, you may not. You may have some in one place, somebody else might have them in a different place. And so they don't have specific names, and we're not going to learn any specific sutural bones. So in addition to learning the names of the bones, you'll be learning the different features that appear on the bones, and this will be really important in lab because you'll have to be able to identify all of these specific features. So these features fall into different categories based on what they do. So articulations are where we have joints usually. So these are how bones are going to join together. So one type of articulation is a condyle. And you can see here's a condyle. A condyle is kind of like a rounded knob. So these are very round, sometimes covered in cartilage that are going to occur at joints. A head is typically a really large epiphysis, and we have two heads that we talk about regularly. So this is the head of the humerus, this is the head of the femur. And you can see this is more of like a semicircle rather than the condyle, which is just kind of rounded. The next type of features that we have are extensions of the bone and projections. And these are typically pieces of the bone that are being pulled on by ligaments that are attached to muscles. So we have crests or narrow ridges. So here's a crest, comes up like this. You have a really big crest on your hip. A epicondyle, so epi means above. Epi means above. So here's a condyle. So an epicondyle is going to be this projection here that occurs above a condyle. So here's another condyle. Above that we have an epicondyle. And these are going to occur here because this is typically where they're going to attach to muscles. A line like this on the parietal bone here is usually for muscle attachment. So you have a big muscle that sits right here. And the line gets pulled along the edge of the muscle and it pulls up the bone in a small line. A process is any kind of bony prominence, again, usually attached to muscles. A spine is a type of process that's usually sharp and pointed, and it's usually can be considered a narrow process. The trochanter is only found on the femur, so we have two trochanters here, the greater and the lesser, and the only trochanters occur on the femur, and these are very large projections due to they attach to the muscles that come up above the leg onto the thigh. A tubercle is another process. This is kind of a rounded process, again, usually attached to some kind of muscle. And then a tuberosity is going to look like this. It's a rough, elevated edge. A lot of the time, tuberosities attach, again, to muscles that kind of pull on the bone here. Another type of feature that we can find on bones are depressions in the bone. We have the alveolus, which is only really found in the teeth, so this is a pit or a socket. We have something called a fossa. So fossa means like a little cup. So here's a little cup. And usually that's because these are where muscles are sitting. So here would be a muscle, here's another muscle, and the muscles sit in the little cups. A fovea is a small pit. So a fovea here, this fovea is actually for a ligament to pass into. And the last kind of features that we have on bones are things like passages through the bones or canals. So a canal is a tubular passage or something like a tunnel. A fissure is a slit through a bone. We don't have any on this picture, but we can find several fissures in the facial bones. A foramen is an opening. So here's a foramen, and foramen means little hole. So foramen are typically very small passages, and these are going to be allowing for nerves to pass through the bone to get to other tissue. Where's my nerves? A meatus is kind of a larger canal. So this is the meatus that allows for your external ear. And then a sinus is an air-filled pocket or space. So you have several sinuses in your skull. And when you get sinus infection, those fill up with fluid and bacteria. Sure, and that's what the pressure is that you feel behind like your forehead when you're sick. So take a moment and reflect on some bones that belong in the axial or appendicular categories.